Ever get that feeling, when you're trying to wrap your head around project
Oh,
management?
yeah.
Maybe there's a new thing you're trying to kick off, or you just want to get a grip on what you've already got going on.
Right.
You need solid foundations, right? But then you think about all that jargon, the theory, it
Yeah,
can feel like a whole other project just to figure that out.
absolutely.
So for this deep dive, we're going to try to cut through all that. We're going to focus on a project management method that's been around forever, and it's still evolving.
Okay.
PRINCE2.
PRINCE2. Yeah, it's a good one. And I think for our listener, who wants to get the important stuff quickly without getting bogged down,
Right.
we're going to look at the book, Managing Successful Projects with PRINCE2 7th edition.
Perfect.
So think of this as your express lane to really understanding PRINCE2, informed by what people are actually doing out there in the real world.
Exactly. And the first thing you need to understand is that PRINCE2 isn't some rigid thing, like rules set in stone.
Right.
The latest guidance really stresses how you can adapt it
Yeah.
to fit what you need for your projects, whatever size they are, whatever type, even if you're using agile.
Yeah.
And we'll look at how this framework can help you with all those risks that just come naturally when you're trying to change things in a business.
Of course.
Because let's face it, any project has more unknowns, right? More than your regular day-to-day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So getting a good understanding of an approach like PRINCE2,
Mm-hmm.
that's a good investment for any organization.
Definitely. So you're probably wondering what exactly PRINCE2 helps you manage, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's start by looking at these 6 aspects of project performance.
Okay,
They're the key things you got to keep under control in any project.
got it.
So first off, costs. Every project has a budget,
Right.
It's got to be affordable. But, there are always things that can push those costs up. And sometimes you might find ways to be more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. Managing costs well isn't just about cutting corners. It's about getting the most out of your investment.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then there's timescales. That's got to be related, right?
Oh, for sure.
It's going to be done.
Yeah.
That's got to be one of the first things anybody asks you, about a project.
Absolutely.
Meeting deadlines, that's critical.
Yeah.
But just finishing on time and within budget, that's not the whole story, is it?
It's not the whole story now.
There's also quality.
Yeah.
How do we make sure what we deliver is actually good?
Exactly. So in PRINCE2, they say the products have to be fit for purpose, right?
Right.
I mean, you could deliver something on time, under budget, but if it doesn't actually work or meet the needs, what was the point?
Exactly, yeah. It's got to be suitable for what it's supposed to do.
Exactly. And to make sure that the result does actually work for you and everyone else involved,
Yeah.
you need to be really clear on the scope.
Scope. Okay.
What exactly will the project deliver?
Mm-hmm.
And just as important, what won't it deliver?
Right. Okay.
This is where misunderstandings happen a lot, Imagine you're building some software.
Okay.
The client might think some features are included, but the dev team, they see it differently.
Yeah.
For them, it's extra unless it's been asked for and budgeted.
Right. So everyone needs to be on the same page right from the start.
Absolutely. And on bigger projects, it's even more important to define the scope precisely,
Yeah.
and you really need to watch out for scope creep.
Scope creep.
That's where the project just keeps growing
Right.
beyond what you agreed on at the beginning, and that leads to delays, budget overruns, the drill.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this next one, benefits, is something that can be easy to forget about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's so fundamental. Like, why are we doing this project anyway?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Right. Let's say you launch this more marketing campaign on time, within budget, exactly as planned.
Perfect.
Yeah. But if it doesn't lead to more sales or, more people knowing your brand,
Yep.
the things you started it for,
Right.
then it hasn't really succeeded.
It hasn't, no.
You've got to understand the purpose, the return on investment. You have to make sure that what you're delivering actually helps you achieve those benefits.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And then finally, we have risk. Every project has some level of uncertainty.
True.
I mean, how much of that are you comfortable with? Say you launch a new product.
Okay.
There's always a chance the market won't react how you hope.
Yeah.
PRINCE2 gives you a structured way to identify those risks, figure out how likely they are, how big the impact could be,
Mm-hmm.
and then plan how you'll handle them, whether it's preventing them, having a backup plan,
Yeah.
or even just accepting they might happen.
Right.
It also looks at opportunities, though, those unexpected good things that might pop up.
Okay, so we've got these 6 key aspects that need careful management throughout the entire project.
Yeah,
But how does PRINCE2 actually help you do that?
right.
Not just tell you what to look out for, but actually do it.
Well, a big part of its philosophy is learning from experience.
Learning from experience. Okay.
And this isn't something you just check off at the end.
Right.
It's got to be happening all the time from the very beginning.
Okay, so it's like an ongoing thing.
Yeah, Prince2 really stresses learning at 3 key stages.
3 key stages. Okay, let's hear them.
Right at the start of a project, when you're first thinking about it,
Yeah.
you should look back at previous projects. What went well, what didn't, what lessons can you apply to this new one?
I see.
If it's something totally new for your organization, it's even more important to get that knowledge. Maybe bring in some outside expertise.
Like if you're implementing a new technology for the first time.
Exactly. Someone else has probably gone through that.
Yeah.
Learning from them could save you so much time and hassle.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the second stage?
As the project is running, this learning has to continue. It's not enough to just spot problems.
Right.
You got to capture what you're learning, put it in your reports and reviews. The point is to be agile,
Right.
to actually look for ways to improve things while the project's still going.
So like if you find a better way of working or a risk you didn't see before.
Exactly. Capture that, act on it. That's key.
Makes sense. So the third stage is when the project wraps up.
That's right. You absolutely have to document and pass on what you've learned.
Yeah.
But here's a crucial insight. Just identifying those lessons isn't enough. They only matter if they actually change how you do things in the future.
So it's not just about writing a report at the end and then filing it away.
No way. They have to lead to actual improvement. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of interesting observations, not real change.
Right. If you don't use what you've learned, you'll probably make the same mistakes again.
Exactly. So now, I know when you first hear about something like Prince2 with all this structure, you might think it's a bit rigid.
Yeah, maybe not so flexible for the specific stuff we're dealing with.
Right, but the good news is Prince2 is designed to be tailored.
Tailored, okay.
It's not about blindly following rules. It's about taking the main ideas and making them fit your specific project, your needs, your context.
So we can adapt it.
Absolutely. But it's not about just picking the bits you like and ignoring the rest.
Right.
There are some conditions. First, whatever you change, it's got to be in line with the 7 core principles of Prince2.
Okay.
They're like the foundation, the bedrock. Second, it shouldn't make it more likely that the project will fail.
Right.
And super important, you got to document the reasons why you made those changes.
Yeah.
Put it in the project initiation documentation, the PID. You need to be able to justify why you adapted certain things.
Okay, so it's about being transparent about the decisions you make.
Exactly. And you also got to consider how your organization sees a project. What they think is simple depends on their size, their experience.
Like a project that seems small in a huge company could be massive for a smaller business.
Exactly. So tailoring is about judging the risk. If the organization sees it as low risk, maybe a lighter touch with Prince2 is fine, but you still got to keep those core principles in mind.
Okay, that makes sense. So now let's talk about the people involved in a Prince2 project.
Right.
Who does what? That's got to be super important for making it all work.
Absolutely. Collaboration is key. Prince2 identifies 3 main groups of stakeholders.
Okay.
The business, the user, and the supplier.
Right. And when we're talking about the business case, the reason for the project,
Yes.
and the benefits it's supposed to deliver, some roles have very clear responsibilities.
For sure.
The executive, right? They're accountable for the business case the whole way through and for how benefits are managed even after the project's finished.
That's right.
They're the champions. They make sure there's a strong business case that aligns with the organization's goals, and they secure the funding.
Exactly. And the senior users,
Yeah.
they define the benefits from the user's perspective, the people who will actually be using the project's outputs.
Right.
So they're responsible for specifying those benefits in the business case.
Yeah.
And for making sure the outcomes are clearly defined. They're like the voice of the users, making sure their needs are met.
So now we have a clearer picture of the why behind a project and the key people involved. But let's dig into the money side a bit more. Investment appraisal techniques.
Ah, yes, the financial side.
Why should our listeners care about this?
It's all about understanding how the project's financial viability is assessed.
Okay.
It helps you understand why certain projects get approved and others don't,
Right.
why decisions are made along the way. You get the bigger picture, the financial drivers behind it all.
Okay, so what are some of these techniques?
Well, one basic one is looking at whole life costs.
Whole life costs. Okay.
It's about analyzing all the costs. Not just the upfront development, but also the ongoing operational costs, maintenance, everything throughout its life.
Got it.
Then there are net benefits.
Net benefits. Okay.
You calculate the total value of all the benefits, minus all the costs, over a certain period. It gives you an idea of the overall financial gain or loss from the project.
So it's like a big picture view of whether it's worth it financially.
Exactly. And then there's return on investment, or ROI, which is super common.
ROI, yeah.
It basically expresses the profit or savings you get as a percentage of the initial investment.
So how much bang for your buck you're getting?
Exactly. The payback period is another good one.
Payback period.
It tells you how long it will take for the benefits to equal the initial investment.
So when do you break even, essentially?
Right. And then there are techniques that consider the time value of money. Money today is worth more than the same amount in the future, right?
Because you could invest it and earn interest.
Exactly. Discounted cash flow and net present value are examples of this.
Okay.
So predicting a benefit of, say, £500,000 in 12 years, it's not the same as having £500,000 today.
Right.
You use a discount rate, maybe 6% to account for that time value, so that future benefit might only be worth, say, £250,000 today.
Wow, that's a big difference.
It is. It shows that the timing of those benefits really matters.
Makes sense. Are there any other techniques?
Oh yeah, there's sensitivity analysis.
Sensitivity analysis.
Business cases, they're based on forecasts, right? And forecasts always have some uncertainty.
Right.
Sensitivity analysis helps you understand how strong the business case is if those assumptions change.
Okay.
So you play what if. You adjust different things, like costs, timescales, risks, and see when the project stops being profitable.
I see.
For example, a project might look good if it's done in 4 months, but any delay makes it unprofitable. That's crucial information.
So it's like understanding the margin for error, the breaking point.
Exactly. It helps you see how much wiggle room you have. Now let's shift gears and talk about the people actually running the project day to day.
Okay.
We have the project manager. This is a really multifaceted role.
Right. They're the ones who make sure everything gets done.
They're the central point of contact, responsible for the project's execution.
Got it.
And then working alongside them, you often have a team manager.
Team manager. Okay.
Their main job is to make sure their team produces the specific things, the deliverables,
Yeah.
that the project manager assigns them to the right standard and on time.
Okay, so they're responsible for their team's output.
Exactly. They report directly to the project manager and take direction from them.
It's interesting that the project manager could actually be the team manager too, right?
Yeah, especially on smaller projects. Or they could delegate it to someone else. It depends on a few things, like
Yeah.
how complex the project is, whether you need special skills to manage certain parts, if the team is spread out geographically, even the preferences of the project board.
It's something to discuss and agree on with the board then.
Absolutely. Now, many projects happen in a commercial environment.
Right, with customers and suppliers.
Exactly. In those cases, both sides need a solid business reason for being involved. And they have to respect each other's ways of doing things, their internal processes.
So both sides need to be on board, essentially.
Yeah. The project manager, who usually comes from the customer side,
Right.
needs to understand their obligations under the contract with the supplier. Often the supplier's people might be team managers,
Okay.
sometimes even with the title project manager within their own organization.
That could be confusing.
It can be, so clear communication is key. And let's be real, team changes happen.
People move on, new people come in.
Exactly. To keep things running smoothly, you need a well-defined team structure
Yeah.
and good role descriptions that explain everyone's responsibilities and who they report to.
So that everyone knows what's expected of them, even if people come and go.
Exactly. And then we have stakeholder engagement and communication.
Communication, that's a big one.
It is, and it's not just about sending out updates. It starts with identifying everyone who has an interest in the project or could be affected by it.
So figuring out who all the stakeholders are.
Exactly. Then you analyze their needs, how interested they are, how much influence they have, what information they need, what information they can provide.
Okay, so it's about understanding your audience.
Right. Once you know who they are and what they need, you plan how you'll engage with them.
So deciding how to communicate with them, what to say, how often, and who should be doing the talking.
Exactly. And it's important to choose people who the audience respects and trusts.
Makes sense. What happens after you've planned it all?
Then it's about actually engaging, putting those plans into action, having those conversations, sending those updates.
And then you measure how well it's working?
Right. Are you reaching the right people with the right information? Project Assurance can help check that.
Okay, so it's an ongoing cycle.
It is. A lot of projects start with a formal meeting to introduce everything, the objectives, the key people.
Yeah, to get everyone on the same page.
Exactly. It's a good sign when the project board is actively involved in those meetings.
Shows they're committed.
It does. Now, let's talk about the things a project produces. The product descriptions.
Product descriptions, okay. What's the point of those?
They're basically a definition for each thing your project will create.
Okay.
It outlines its purpose, what it's for, what it'll be made of, how it'll be created, its format, how it'll be presented,
Right.
and most importantly, the quality criteria. It's like a blueprint and a quality check all in one.
And those quality criteria need to be specific, measurable, right?
Absolutely. Clear enough that anyone looking at the product can say objectively whether it meets the requirements.
I see.
For example, if you're developing a mobile app, a quality criterion might be that it loads in 3 seconds on a certain device with certain network conditions.
Okay.
Or if it's a user manual, quality criteria could be the clarity of the writing, the accuracy of the information, even the size and weight if it's printed.
Right. Makes sense.
And you should also reference any relevant supporting information, things like industry standards, design documents.
So it's like a complete package of information about the product and how to judge its quality.
Exactly.
So then once you have these product descriptions and you're building the products, how do you actually make sure they meet the quality standard?
That's where quality reviews come in.
Quality reviews.
Yeah. A formal meeting isn't always necessary, especially if the written feedback is clear and there's no disagreement.
Okay.
But if the feedback is unclear or contradictory, then a structured review meeting can be really helpful.
To get everyone on the same page.
Exactly. And then after the review, there's got to be a clear process for following up.
Right, so addressing the feedback and making sure the changes are made.
Exactly. And you need to get sign-off, communicate the changes to everyone involved, store the records properly, and then request formal approval for the product.
So it's about closing the loop on the feedback process.
Exactly.
Now, another thing to consider is the planning horizon.
The planning horizon, yeah.
How far ahead should you be planning the project's activities?
That really depends on the work itself and how risky it is.
Okay, so a complex project might need more frequent check-ins than a straightforward one.
Right. Think about installing a standard computer system versus migrating a complex legacy application.
Right, one is much more predictable than the other.
Exactly. And it's often a good idea to align the ends of your management stages with key milestones.
Okay.
Like the board might want to review the results of a proof of concept before committing a bunch of resources to the full rollout.
That makes sense. What if your project is part of a larger program?
Then aligning the ends of your stages with the program's review points can be really helpful.
For seeing the big picture?
Yeah, for assessing the overall progress and viability.
And for risky projects?
For those shorter stages with frequent reviews, give the board more chances to reassess the risks.
Before committing too much money or resources.
Exactly. So it gives them more control, and they can make better decisions as the project goes on.
Okay, now let's talk about how to break down and visualize all the things your project needs to deliver.
Right, the product breakdown structure, the PBS.
PBS,
The diagram that shows all the products, the deliverables, everything the project needs to create.
And it's not just about the final product, right? You break it down into smaller parts.
Exactly. You can keep breaking it down into more manageable components and then break those down even further.
Okay.
And here's a good point. You can think about products in different states.
Different states.
Yeah, like a software component, it might go through draft, then tested, then approved.
Okay.
Each state might need its own description with specific quality criteria, especially if responsibility for the product moves between teams.
Okay, I see. So it's about tracking the product through its life cycle.
Exactly. And when you're presenting the PBS, visual cues can be really helpful.
Visual cues? Like what?
Different shapes, colors,
Okay.
to show different types of products, which team is responsible, which stage they're planned for.
So it's like a visual map of all the project's outputs.
Exactly. It makes things much easier to understand.
So if a project has multiple stages, would you create a separate PBS for each stage?
Yes, exactly. The products for each stage are taken from the overall project PBS.
Right.
And then you can add more detail to those stage-specific PBSs.
Okay.
The important thing is to use consistent names for everything.
So there's no confusion.
Right. And creating those detailed stage plans might even mean you have to go back and change the overall project plan.
To make sure everything still fits together.
Exactly.
Now, what about organizations that already have their own ways of defining deliverables?
Yeah, some organizations have predefined PBS templates, product flow diagrams, and libraries of product descriptions.
That sounds helpful.
It could be a good starting point. But you shouldn't just skip the PRINCE2 approach.
Right. You still need to use the PRINCE2 techniques.
Exactly. You got to verify those existing materials, make sure they fit your specific project, because every project is unique. There might be extra requirements, differences in quality criteria, different locations, different teams involved.
So you can't just assume the templates will cover everything.
No. Plus, predefined models often only address one aspect of the project.
Okay, let's talk about how product-based planning works with agile methods.
That's a great question. Many organizations are combining those approaches now.
Right.
And the good news is product-based planning fits very well with Agile.
Okay, good.
The focus is still on defining the requirements clearly.
So it's all about what you're delivering.
Yeah, Agile might use sprints, user stories, backlogs, but the idea is the same.
To organize the work around delivering specific requirements.
Exactly.
So how would a PRINCE2 project that's using Agile actually look in terms of planning?
One common approach is to use a PRINCE2 stage for starting up a project, defining the vision, objectives, and a high-level roadmap.
Okay.
Then initiating a project stage to create the product backlog.
The backlog, right.
Yeah, the prioritized list of requirements. And then you have a series of delivery stages, with each stage releasing specific groups of requirements or features.
Delivered through sprints?
Often, yes. So it combines the flexibility of Agile with the structure of PRINCE2.
Makes sense. Now, when it comes to figuring out how long tasks will take and how much they'll cost, what kind of estimating techniques does Prince2 recognize?
PRINCE2 doesn't mandate specific techniques, but it acknowledges several common ones.
Okay.
There's parametric estimating, which uses historical data and statistical relationships.
Okay.
Like if you're developing software, you might have data on the average effort for a certain number of lines of code.
Right.
Then there's single-point estimating, which is basically getting a best guess from someone experienced.
Okay.
And three-point estimating, this gets three estimates: best case, most likely, and worst case.
Oh, interesting.
Then you calculate a weighted average. It's more robust than a single guess.
I see. So it takes into account the range of possibilities.
Exactly.
We talked a bit about risk management earlier, but let's dive a little deeper.
Risk management, crucial.
Absolutely. So in Prince2, you're constantly identifying risks, right? Both threats and opportunities.
That's right. You assess them, plan how to manage them, and keep reviewing them throughout the project.
And you use lessons from previous projects to inform your approach.
Definitely. And PRINCE2 has specific things for managing risk, doesn't it?
It does, right? Tell me more about those.
There's the risk management approach. It's a document that describes exactly how you'll manage risk on this project.
Okay.
Processes, techniques, responsibilities, the whole 9 yards.
Got it.
And then there's the risk register. It's a record of all the risks, both threats and opportunities.
Okay.
Their status, history, who's responsible, everything.
So it's like a living document that tracks all the risk throughout the project.
Exactly. And different roles have specific responsibilities for risk management.
Right.
The senior supplier manages supplier-related risks. The project manager creates and maintains the approach and the register. Team managers handle risks within their work packages, and project assurance checks that everything's being done properly.
So it's a shared responsibility.
It is. And PRINCE2 emphasizes that how you manage risk should align with how you're delivering the project.
So like a formal risk review meeting might not work for a fast-paced agile project.
Exactly. PRINCE2 doesn't say you have to use a specific format or schedule. What matters is that it's appropriate.
So in an agile project, the risk register could just be a section on a board that's reviewed daily.
Exactly, as long as it works for that project.
Makes sense. Let's clarify something about risks. We've talked about threats, but Prince2 also covers opportunities.
Yes, it's important to take both seriously. For example, if currency exchange rates could affect your budget, that's actually two risks: a favorable change and an unfavorable change. You might need different strategies for each.
Right, because a favorable change could also be a risk if you're not prepared for it.
Exactly. And one common response is to prepare contingent plans.
Contingent plans, okay.
So you develop a plan now, but you only implement it if the risk actually happens.
So it's like a just-in-case plan.
Exactly.
What happens after you've chosen a response to a risk?
You integrate it into your project plans, whether it's the overall plan, a stage plan, even a work package.
Okay.
And for big risks, you might have early warning indicators.
Early warning indicators, what are those?
They're signs that the risk is becoming more likely.
So you can react early.
Exactly. And you got to consider how your responses might affect other things.
Like the schedule, the budget, other stakeholders.
Yeah, all of that. And remember, the best person to manage a risk might not be on the project team.
Right, it could be someone external.
Exactly. So besides the risks you identify up front, there are always unexpected issues.
Issues, yeah, things pop up all the time. How does Prince2 define an issue?
It's any unplanned event, past, present, or future, that's relevant to the project and needs some action.
Okay, so it could be a lot of things.
It could. A stakeholder raising a concern, a question that needs answering, a request for a change, a suggestion, something that doesn't meet the specs.
Can you give me some examples?